welcome to another episode of Habits for Health. Today we are discussing Recovery Day nutrition and how to use that to optimize your health and longevity. And we are seeking to create this balance of things. If we do one or the other too much, we will create imbalance and poor outcomes in health, which is kind of our goal of explaining both the muscle growth day as well as the recovery day. So do you want to start by talking a little bit about the goal of a recovery day, Wouter?
Yeah, sure. So the goal for your recovery day is to feed the muscle with plenty of protein to recover from workouts. The other goal here is to activate AMPK by reducing calorie intake. And by doing this, by activating AMPK, we're trying to improve our metabolic health. So that's the main goal there: recovery from your workout and improving metabolic health. So yeah, I think we could dive into the macronutrients for this, and then I'll come up with some general advice.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Let's do that.
Okay, so just as with on training days, I would suggest an adequate amount of protein of 1.5 to maybe 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram per day. Slightly more than what I suggested for the workout days. Because we're consuming less calories and therefore it might be more beneficial to have a slightly higher protein intake. I'm not afraid of overactivating mTOR by eating an adequate amount of protein, because this is just necessary to recover from our training and to maintain a healthy muscle mass. So AMPK will be active enough through calorie restriction, carb restriction, and through the types of foods that we eat. I would suggest no more than 35 grams of carbohydrates for this day, because that's what's basically needed for your brain to function well. And the remainder of your calories should come from fats. Your total calorie intake could be like 10% less than your average, or maybe 20% less than your average, based on what feels comfortable for you. I personally take 10% less because I find it difficult to eat enough on my training days otherwise to compensate and go for that 20% more than average on those days. So I'm taking a less aggressive approach to calorie restriction here. Yeah, as an example, let's take my own body weight. I'm 79 kilograms. So I would take 150 grams of protein, just the same as on my training days, maybe a little bit more, that would be fine. So my average calorie intake is 3,000 calories. Now take 10% off of that and I'm at 2,700. I'm getting 600 calories from protein. 150 grams of protein translates to 600 calories from proteins. And then I have my carbs. That's 35 times 4, so 140 grams of 140 calories of carbs, and the remainder is fats. So that's it's like 1,960 calories from fat. That divided by 9 is like 218 grams of fat. So I'm mostly eating fat on this day, and I'm actually eating ad libitum, and by doing so I mostly end up roughly with these macronutrients. So that was it for the macronutrients, and now I'd like to share some general advice for your recovery day diet.
Just before we dive into that, should we just we discuss a little bit about those details? I have some thoughts on that. Cool. So yeah, so like I really like these overall metrics and things that you focus on during these days. So I would say again, there are like many different nuances in terms of how you could do it, and it's a lot about what do you feel best about doing. Because so for instance, in terms of protein, you don't have to do a lot of protein. It kind of depends on you. So you could also go really low in protein on these days, and that could potentially activate AMPK even more. Another way to actually also activating AMPK a lot and thus recovery, that could also be, okay, I gotta say, this is not 100% determined by scientific studies at this point, but there are a lot of studies that point in this direction that you could potentially get like get rid of kind of the mTOR activation of protein by basically upping your intake of glycine. And glycine are found like in the tissue and bones of animals. You could also get it from like from a glycine powder. You can get it from gelatin, which is also taken
Hmm.
from bones of animals. Those kind of things could be like a way to actually eat your protein without having it spike mTOR a lot, if at all. And it kind of makes sense if you just think about how our ancestors they tended to eat. So they ate the whole animal. They ate the organs, they ate the
Hmm.
muscle meat and everything. But today we're just eating the muscle meat, and that is really rich in leucine and methionine, which are the most powerful stimulators of mTOR. So if you actually up your intake of glycine, then you potentially be able to not really get that huge spike in mTOR that you otherwise would get from protein. So that could be a way of actually getting your protein without spiking that excessively. And for me personally, I kind of switch up what I'm doing. If I want to eat a lot of protein, I basically just balance it with glycine. And if I don't really feel like eating protein, like I just don't really have that need for the glycine. But glycine is actually amazing for so many things, other than just like reducing that mTOR spike. Like it's also just incredible for reducing insulin need in the body, lowering blood glucose, and even for like actually maintaining muscle mass. So actually there's some quite interesting studies that even in a low protein state, if you actually consume a decent amount of glycine, potentially about like 10 to 20 grams, then you could actually maintain muscle mass even though you're actually staying at a low protein intake, which is really interesting. So that could also be a way to actually use that to your benefit. So this is something that like I
Hmm.
think about, which is why like I don't feel like I need the protein always. Like sometimes I do because I just feel like it tastes like it's nice to have and all that, but like I don't feel like I need it to the same degree. And also, a thing with recovery days is also that like uh, your focus could also be a bit different depending on how many calories you actually end up consuming. So if you go really low in calories, like if you even want to go like further than minus 20% of your maintenance, then you likely might want to eat more protein because basically like you'd probably be extremely hungry most of the day if you just like undereat so much. And protein is the most satiating food there is, which means that you're actually able to eat less and still feel full if you actually eat a lot of protein. And the thing is also like if you're reducing your calories to this extent, then the increase in mTOR that you get from the protein probably won't really have a big effect because you're basically reducing your calories so much. So like you kind of like still probably get a pretty good decrease in mTOR even if you aren't to consume
Hmm.
glycine. This is something quite interesting that also creates some nuances there. And also like so in
Yeah.
terms of carbs, like it's pretty cool to like just really reduce the carbs to activate AMPK more. And the thing is also, so like for me, I really love the concept of tying your carb intake to activity levels. So if you do a lot of activities, even on recovery days, you could easily like consume more carbs without really having an effect on mTOR. And something that like I think about, and also like for like eating food, like it's nice to actually be able to eat some carbs and not be restricted all the time. But like if you're not really doing any activity, then if you really want to activate AMPK, you kind of have to go pretty low in carbs. Otherwise, you won't really activate it much, and
Hmm.
like you get a pretty big surge in mTOR by consuming a lot of carbs. So this is something to think about as well. That
Yeah.
your activity also determines a lot in terms of your actual requirements of of carbs. But overall, I feel like this is a really good approach, and there's just some nuances that could affect how you want to structure your macros of this day.
Yeah. thank you for sharing this, and I think it's a good addition to what we're discussing here. So yeah, I would say like if you want to have more AMPK activation, then perhaps you could have even restrict your protein intake. And I think using glycine to kind of offset the negative effects for your recovery days with mTOR, I think that's a great idea. And there are more supplements that you can use to achieve this, which we will dive into perhaps another time. But yeah, glycine does seem promising for reducing an mTOR spike whilst still getting your required amount of protein. So yeah, I guess it's up to our viewers to decide like to what extent do you want to stimulate muscle growth as opposed to cellular protection on those recovery days.
Yeah, good point.
All right. So shall I move on to some general advice for these recovery days?
Yeah, let's do that. Sounds good.
Okay. So as always, I would say divide your proteins over your meals. I would also say focus mainly on saturated fatty acids. I would also get some omega-3 fatty acids from fatty cold water fish, like mackerel, herring, salmon. You could optionally get some omega-9 fatty acids from things like avocado. I would try and avoid omega-6 fatty acids as much as possible, or at least try to make sure that you're not consuming more than 2 times as many omega-6 fatty acids as omega-3 fatty acids. And I would obviously banish all banish all processed omega-6 fatty acids, and even actually banish all processed unsaturated fats. Because it's very likely that they're oxidized, and I would just try and avoid those as a whole. If you're getting those omega-3, 6, and 9 fatty acids, get them from whole foods, get them from raw foods that you're going to prepare yourself. I would also focus on high quality animal protein for these days. Maybe you can restrict your leucine and methionine a little bit by getting more fish as opposed to meat on these days. I would also focus on nutrient-dense vegetables. I would try and eat most of your carbs for that days in your last meal of the day, because this might help with sleep. Then also I would try and not eat up to like 3 hours before bedtime, as usual. Also, your last meal of the day shouldn't be your largest meal of the day, ideally, because you kind of want to wind it down. I would also use herbs, spices, garlic, and onions as much as possible on these days, except for perhaps in your last meal. You don't want to have any like heavy spices in your last meal, because that might interrupt your sleep at night. So that was it for the general advice that I have for those recovery days.
Cool. Yeah, I feel like it's some good advice. And so also like just want to mention in terms of the animal proteins. So yeah, so besides that, you could, as you mentioned, like maybe do fish more than other ruminant animals and other land-based animals to reduce leucine intake. So besides
Mhm.
the glycine focus that I mentioned before, you could also do organs. Organs in are
Mhm.
extremely nutritious,
Yeah.
and the most is probably liver, which is an amazing food. And so like if you like prioritize organs on these days, especially, then you could easily eat some other animal foods as well. Like you could easily eat like some dairy products and maybe some also like a steak or something as well, because you get a lot of glycine from the organs as well.
Mhm.
So it could be a
Yeah.
way to also balance that. And again, you have so many nutrients in organs, so like it's a really really good food to get into
Yeah.
your diet several times a week if possible. And if not, you're also able to like get it from a supplement if you want as well. But that's also a way to be able to reduce the leucine intake and get that balance of the glycine, leucine, methionine, and all that
Mhm.
together. And yeah, like I really like the emphasis on reducing the unsaturated fatty acids from like foods that you buy, because like they tend to cause so much inflammation in the body, and because they're so oxidized, and they get even more even further oxidized in the body, especially if you aren't preparing them properly, aren't consuming them with antioxidants, and your body isn't ready for them. So the thing is, like, you um your cells and your body is comprised of fats, and if you consume some bad fats, the thing is that they can stay up in your body for up to 7 to 10 years. So that means that even though you might really enjoy this food today, you will basically create harm for 7 to 10 years in your body. So
Hmm.
there's something to think about, and this is actually why, like, I would much rather eat tons of sugar like within a day or whatever than eating tons of unsaturated oxidized fatty acids from like bad foods, because this short-term harm potentially, even if I wasn't like to do any activity and just sit around all day and just eating tons of candy or whatever, like it would only be short-term harm, and your body could easily recover from that over maybe like a few days, a few weeks or something. But this constant inflammation and harm from these fatty acids just continue to be ongoing for so long. So like to me, it really doesn't seem worth it at all. So like if I were you and like I were to consume some of these foods, like I would make sure to really enjoy it, because you will
Hmm.
your your body won't enjoy it. So at
Yeah.
least you would have to enjoy it, because it's going to create harm for a long time.
Yeah.
But and also like so the in terms of the eating before bed is also like a good point. And I would say like at least 3 hours is really good. And it all depends on how many calories you actually consume.
Hmm.
So like if
Yeah.
you actually end up consuming like a big last meal of your day, then ideally you actually have to like have an even longer period than 3 hours before bed, I would say, because it takes a long time to actually digest that food for your body. And the thing is, if you have a lot of food in your body when you go to sleep, then your body won't actually be able to have full resources to actually recover during sleep, because it has to spend some resources on actually breaking down the food while you sleep, which is not a good thing, because ideally you want all your body resources to actually focus on restoration
Hmm.
through sleep. And also, as you alluded to in terms of like the spices, um, so in your last meal, so like it's indeed like good idea not to consume a lot of those like close to bed, because they raise your body temperature, and when you go to sleep, your body tries to lower your body temperature, because then it can actually get to sleep and actually sleep better. And if you consume a lot of spices, it can actually increase your body temperature, and then you have a lot harder time to actually stay asleep and fall asleep. So this is also why like this is important to not do a lot of those close to bed. So
Yeah.
yeah, these are some quite important things to keep in mind. And I really like these overall rules that you or advice that you came up with, Wouter.
Yeah, thank you. And those are good additions about the spices and stuff. Also, I'd like to add that using these spices and herbs when cooking can also help prevent oxidation of these fatty acids in the cooking process. Um, Another thing is, well, you mentioned organs. Yeah, I think the recovery days are an amazing opportunity to take these organ meats, and digestion is indeed very calorie consuming, which is also why you wouldn't eat just before going to the gym. Let me go to the meal breakdown if you're ready for that.
For sure. Go ahead.
Okay, so for breakfast, I would mostly go for eggs because they're high in choline. They're a very vitamin-rich food, and I'll mostly fry the eggs sunny side up, low temperature, of course. You don't want to oxidize anything, and I'll use butter, of course, a saturated fat to cook with, and I might have some chocolate, some dark chocolate, or an avocado to go with that. Add vegetables if you'd like. I might have some tomatoes with this meal. As you can see, this is very saturated fat oriented and just a moderate amount of protein as always. For lunch, I would mostly have leafy greens with some mackerel. So I'll make a salad with leafy greens, mackerel, maybe some mozzarella, and some salt and pepper, and some extra virgin olive oil. Then for dinner, I would mostly have ground beef or some other kind of meat. I won't eat much, like maybe 100 grams, because I'm getting plenty of protein. And this is also where I'll have most of my vegetables. Like I might add beans, maybe peas, or anything else. And I'll also focus on saturated fats for this meal. So I might have things like bone marrow with maybe some low carb bread for this meal as well. Um, so once again, very many saturated fats for this meal. I've had plenty of omega-3s from my lunch. So there's no need to supplement that as well. And then sometime after dinner, I'll probably have some full-fat Greek yogurt with some blueberries and a pinch of cinnamon. I don't want to overdo the cinnamon here because it is a spice that'll heat up your body a little bit. So yeah, that's pretty much it for these recovery days. This is mostly how I'll eat.
Yeah, sounds good. I like your approach, and it's some really nutrient dense foods that you do include. Yeah, so for me, like I don't really see the need of of oleic acid foods, omega-9 foods.
Mhm.
But I understand that some people like enjoy them, and they are definitely healthier than like getting some really rich omega-6 foods. Even
Mhm.
like something like I would say like seeds and nuts. I wouldn't really call them healthy. They're probably healthier than processed foods, but you would ideally have to go for some more saturated ones that will be a lot more stable in your body and create a lot less oxidation, inflammation in your body. So like the dark chocolate, for instance, like I really love that food. It's a really great one. It's got like amazing fatty acids and also some really good polyphenols in there as well. And even like if you do say 90%, 80%, 75, 85% dark chocolate, like you get a little bit of sugar, but if you're healthy or if you're like just active, like you could easily be able to handle that amount of sugar. It shouldn't cause any harm. So that's a really good thing to focus on, I would say. And also like the leafy greens is also pretty cool because like you get some good vitamins and like bio availability by combining them with these animal-based foods. Like a combination can actually do a lot of good rather than having them
Mhm.
alone, because like some of these foods they kind of
Yeah.
like they're kind of bound, and then if you actually get some like different digestive processes going through different foods, you're actually able to kind of unlock them and actually digest them and make them a lot more bioavailable for your body. So having that combination is really good. And it's also kind of why like you see people like on a vegan diet, they have like a lot of difficulty actually getting enough vitamins and minerals from their foods, even if actually eating the foods that are say high
Yeah.
in minerals and vitamins, because they don't have these animal-based products that actually make these a lot easier for the body to actually digest. So they basically just break down a lot of it and don't really get a lot of out of actually eating those foods. So having this combination is a really good approach.
Yeah.
And and also like I like the kind of like snack after dinner or the soda, what do you want to call it, because it's like it's good in healthy fats, and also probiotics from the Greek yogurt as well is also amazing, and also the highest protein based yogurt. It's also can help with sleep, getting some protein before bed and getting a bit of carbs. And the cinnamon is also like it's a really good spice. So
Yeah.
I feel like it is really good good focus, and you also get the bone marrow for like getting some really healthy fats and proteins in there as well. And so I feel like this is good. And again, I don't really see the need of getting the extra virgin olive oil, but if you really like the taste, then I guess it's fine, just as long as you don't overdo it. Like if you consume that in every single meal, uh, I don't really see how that could be a healthy thing to do, to be honest. So
Yeah.
I would say if you do a little bit just for taste, then it's probably fine. But if you do that in every single meal, cook all your meals in it and pour it in all salads and all that, I find it really hard to really that wouldn't be too much, because you get a lot of unsaturated fats from that,
Yeah.
your body needs a lot of saturated fatty acids. Your brain is constructed of about 60% of saturated fatty acids, which also just says a lot about your actual needs of saturated fatty acids. So ideally, you would definitely not overdo these.
Yeah. So saturated fats are less prone to oxidation, and this is something that vegans tend to forget. Um, so yeah, those vitamins in the saturated fatty acids, they really help with bioavailability of other nutrients, like you said. On to the additional advice that I have for this. I would suggest to try and eat more fermented foods than I do. I don't really like fermented foods, so the only fermented food that I'll have is the full-fat Greek yogurt. So try and add some if you can. Also, if you want to stimulate AMPK even more, you can reduce your calorie intake even more, and you can also restrict your protein intake. You can probably, like if you have consecutive recovery days, then you might want to further increase your calorie restriction on the consecutive days. Like the further away from your training, the more it would make sense to stimulate AMPK. Also, you can use polyphenols to activate AMPK. So I actually have my brand Elixir Life has a supplement called Strong Heart, which is optimized for AMPK. It contains a bunch of polyphenols that work together synergistically. And I also have another product called Smooth Move, which is a combination of polyphenols that have been traditionally used in Eastern medicine. But of course, these are not the only AMPK activators. So yeah, these are just some things to keep in mind. And that was all of the additional advice that I have for this, and we'll dive further into supplements to optimize your recovery day even further in the future.
Sounds good. Yeah, good ideas for sure. And yes, your whole point on the further away from your training you are from that means that you're able to actually activate AMPK more and get more benefit from it because you basically like the training that you do, it basically it actually lowers mTOR from actually doing a workout, and then you actually bounce back from like eating something, from getting the nutrition right after that. So that also means that you can actually keep on adding to that spike that will happen when you get to eat by actually putting different lifestyle elements into it to increase it even further. So for instance, as you mentioned, with doing extended calorie restriction over several days, fasting, stuff like that, and also as you mentioned, we could like many supplements, other things you could also do to focus on that we could also focus on. So another thing is, for instance, also cold, which could also be used in a lot of different ways, which
Mhm.
we'll also discuss in another episode.
Yeah.
But overall, it is some like there's some pretty important things to keep in mind because you're actually able to get like a much higher increase in mTOR when you actually do want to build muscle if you actually make use of these AMPK and thus recovery based activities when you're not actually working out.
Hmm.
And this makes sense evolutionarily, and also just based on how our bodies work. Because so if your body is in a state where it's kind of struggling, it's kind of like it's kind of not really getting what it needs, then when it actually gets what it needs, then it really wants to really promote like and make full use of that. So that means so like basically then when you do make use of these strategies to actually activate muscle growth, your body just wants to like throw everything at it at once to really get something out of it. So that means that like the further away you are from actually um, nutrition, from being in a state of abundance, basically, the more you're actually able to really increase muscle growth when you do choose to exercise and get your nutrition in. So something to think about that many things you can actually compound like the benefits of exercise by doing this by doing a lot of different strategies to really increase this effect when you do choose to focus on muscle growth. And this is something that is quite important in terms of also just having this balance of AMPK and mTOR, because as was also mentioned, that like if you focus on one of the other too much, you will experience bad effects. You can have really poor health outcomes long term based on that. So as you also mentioned, that if you spike mTOR too often and too much, you can drive too much growth. You can drive which basically leads to cancer cell growth as well, which you don't want.
Hmm.
And if you actually focus on recovery too much, AMPK too much, you can become you can lose all your
Real.
muscles. It becomes really
Yeah.
frail. And that's also why you see so many elderly people. They actually die because they're frail. They aren't able to endure through infections, through falls, all those things, because as you age, you lose muscle mass automatically. If you don't actually make use of your muscles and keep on training them. So there's something which is really important, which means that you have to get this pro balance of both. Not too much muscle growth, not too much recovery, but getting a really good balance of both, which is kind of why we have these 2 days where
Hmm. Yeah.
usually we are kind of like changing like from one day to the next. So we have one day for muscle growth and one day for recovery. Sometimes we want to change it, as mentioned, to like get more benefits from mTOR activation or AMPK activation, but overall having like a pretty normal regime and just changing it up every single day, because then you get a pretty good balance, and this is really important. So this is why we really want to focus on having both these days, and also why we also want to include and talk about even more ways to really focus on maximizing AMPK when you do want to activate that.
Yeah, totally. It's important to focus on both. We want to prevent frailty, and we also don't want to get any metabolic diseases. Um, so yeah, what you also mentioned is that you could apply like cold and those kinds of things to kind of stack your lifestyle factors, stack your diet factors, and stack exercise factors to all stimulate AMPK to a greater extent. And then you could also do the opposite with these other aspects. Um, like you want to avoid certain lifestyle factors that activate AMPK right after your workout and such. So yeah, that's definitely something that we're going to dive deeper into.
For sure. Sounds great. And this is going to be really important to really learn about and to really dive deeper into. So yeah, looking forward to discussing that further. And I feel like this is a really good, really good start and really good primer on what are some valuable things to think about when choosing recovery and when trying to get a balance of the two.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. All right. That's it. That's all I wanted to share on this topic for today. How about you?
Cool. Yes, I don't have anything else at this moment, and then we'll just dive deeper as we get into supplements and other lifestyle factors that could affect both these days, and how we can use that to even further optimize all things.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Andreas, and thank you to our viewers if you're still sticking with us till the end. If you have any questions, do let us know, and we'll try and reach out to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Wouter,
All
and thank
right.
you so much everyone for watching. Have a great day, and talk to you all soon.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Bye.